All right, so continuing on with the note on the circulatory system, let's do a quick refresh as to what the circulatory system is because I would have started the topic already. So as the name suggests, circulatory system, we're talking about circulating substances in the body, right? How are these substances circulated? Of course, they are being transported through various means, right? And the two main systems that we look at as it relates to the circulatory system, right, is our cardiovascular system and our lymphatic system. So the cardiovascular system deals with the heart and by extension, all organs or connecting tissue that is related to the heart. The lymphatic system, right, has to do with your immune system, so your lymph nodes and so on. Remember, on a daily basis, we are consistently fighting off infections, right? Our immune system works over time because the atmosphere in itself, when we are breathing in air, just existing, right? There are many pathogens, viral infections, and so on, more so that you all are in school. And the purpose of the lymphatic system, really and truly, is to get rid of all of those toxins and so on that may arise as a result of your immune system trying to fight off or suppress infections, right? So let's take a look at the need for transport in the human body. Why is transport important? So the absorption and transport of substances in humans, first and foremost, is affected by two factors. Their surface area to volume ratio. So surface area and volume means you want, especially if it deals with the transport of something, minerals, oxygen, and so on, you would like a large surface area because a large surface area means that more substances could be transported, right? And the volume as well. So you don't want, if it is a large volume of, say, blood that needs to be transported, that these vessels or whatever type of organ, right, has a small surface area. It's really dependent on what is being transported as well. And of course, the limitations of simple diffusion. So again, simple diffusion has to do with gases, right? Diffusion speaks to the ability of gas to be transported throughout the body. So humans have a small surface area to volume ratio. Diffusion through their body surface is not adequate to supply all their body cells with their requirements and remove their waste. In addition, most of their body is too far from its surface for substances to move through by simple diffusion. So what they're referring to here is that could we take in substances that could then be dissolved in a type of way, oxygen gases and so on, and be dissolved in a type of way to then diffuse freely throughout our bodies. Think about it. Could we get things like minerals, vitamins, all of these products of digestion when we consume food, all of these mineral substances that need to be transported through our body, could we really have it diffused, the way insects may have certain things diffused or animals may have things diffused in their bodies? No, we need an actual transport system to circulate all of these materials, right? Whether it's useful substances, whether it's getting rid of waste substances, we need useful means by which these things could be transported in and out of our bodies, right? So humans have therefore developed a transport system to carry useful substances from specialized organs that absorb them. For example, the lungs and ileum, and as I indicated, the ileum is the small intestine, to body cells and as well as to carry waste substances from these body cells to organize organs that excrete them. So we have our kidneys and lungs in particular, which are excretory um, organs, right? So our kidneys get rid of all of, the salts, bile salts, any kind of products of, as it's going through our digestive system and so on. Um, your kidneys is responsible for uh, excreting all of this waste product that then filters into your bladder, and then you release that, right? And what we know with our lungs, we breathe out carbon dioxide. So materials transported around the human body. The following materials are transported around the human body. We have useful substances such as oxygen, water, digested food, vitamins, minerals, hormones, antibodies, and plasma protein. Heat is also carried about. Well, we know heat is carried about. Heat is a product of digestion, right? Um, Heat is also a product of respiration. Remember, that's how we get a lot of our energy. So this goes back to when we spoke about respiration, that respiration isn't just what we think respiration is. We think when we hear the word respiration as breathing, but respiration really and truly is energy and ATP, remember, adenosine triphosphate. But we will do a recap. So all of those topics, we will revisit them. I'm hoping that next week we can do a cap-off session for the term, so that I am able to better prepare you all for end of term exams, right? And then we have waste substances such as carbon dioxide and nitrogenous waste such as urea. And again, when you hear the word urea, you think of urine, right? So all of the urea and so on comes out in the form of your urine. Okay, so the first system within the circulatory system we want to look at is the cardiovascular system. So what is the cardiovascular system? The cardiovascular system is a system that consists of blood, and blood which serves as the medium to transport substances around the body, right? So blood isn't just so that when we cut ourselves, we bleed, right? We bleed something that's red. The purpose of blood is to transport substances. Blood transports oxygen. Remember, blood contains red blood cells, and red blood cells are shaped in a particular way, like little discs, because they're able to trap the oxygen and transport it around the body, right? So blood serves as a medium to transport substances around the body. Blood also transports minerals, salts, so many things. When you take medication, right, intravenously, so through your veins, it transports it to where it needs to go, right? Blood vessels, so it's made up of blood as well as blood vessels. So blood vessels, which are tubes through which the blood flows to and from parts of the body, right? So our blood vessels are like a network, right? Your blood vessels, you think about your veins and so on, they're like a network throughout your entire body. They go in there, intertwined in your muscles and so on. And think of it as the way, water runs their water. All of these pipelines and so on, those are considered your vessels, your blood vessels, right? So the same way water is able to pump water to different parts of Trinidad and Tobago, through the entire country, actually. It's the same way your body works. You're able to pump blood throughout your entire body. And then the heart. So your heart is like your pump, right? Your heart is the organ that is responsible because it's consistently beating. And what it's doing is that contraction, that consistent contraction. Think about how the heart works as a muscle, right? That consistent contraction is causing blood to be pumped throughout your blood vessels. And it's for this reason when someone gets a heart attack, so their heart stops beating, it's unable to pump blood around the body. And remember, blood is responsible for transporting oxygen. So it is for this reason when persons get a heart attack, they die immediately, right? Right. So sorry for that morbid example, but that's realistically what happens, right? So let's look at blood. What is blood? Now we think of blood as, you know, just this red liquid that is contained in our bodies. But blood is made up of so much more, right? Blood is composed actually of three types of cells. In our blood, we have red blood cells, right, which give, you know, that pigment and so on, right? We have white blood cells, which are our leukocytes, lymphocytes, and so on. And we have platelets. So these cells are suspended in a fluid called plasma. So what we consider to be blood is actually made up of all of these components, right? But when we think of, you know, just seeing the red liquid in itself, that is considered to be plasma, right? Cells make up about 45% by volume of the blood, and the plasma makes up about 55%. So when we don't actually see with our naked eye red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets, right? Just to be clear, when we get a cut, right, we just see a red liquid, which is the plasma that we are able to view with the naked eye. But contained in that plasma, right, you have 45% consisting of red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. So look at the diagram here of the red blood cells, and you would see what I mean by it's shaped like little discs, right? And it's actually shaped like discs here, where there's like a thumbprint. Envision like somebody press something flat and it creates a kind of hollow space here. And that is what traps the oxygen, is able to push the oxygen as moving through your body, right? So we know that plasma has 45% red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets, right? Sorry, we know blood has 45% red blood cell, white blood cell, platelets, and plasma makes up about 55% of that. But what is plasma exactly? Let's take a look, right? What is plasma? Plasma is a yellowish fluid composed about 90% water and 10% dissolved substances. So that's quite interesting, right? So we think of blood as just being red, but plasma is actually the yellowish fluid. So I don't know if you've ever gotten a cut, and as it's healing, the surface of that cut looks a little yellow. Or maybe you've had a pimple at some point in time that you squeeze, and as the surface is crossing over, you notice a kind of yellow kind of crusting over. And that is plasma, right? Because I'm sure this is something that is relatable to many of you all. Plasma is a yellowish fluid which is composed of 90% water and 10% dissolved substances. So what are these dissolved substances? These dissolved substances are products of digestion, such as glucose, amino acids, vitamins, and minerals, as well as waste product, dissolved carbon dioxide and urea, hormones, example, insulin and thyroxine, and plasma proteins. So these are some, you know, new names that you have never heard: fibrinogen, prothrombin, well, you've heard of albumin, and antibodies, right? But the fibrinogen and prothrombin, those are new terms, but they are essentially plasma proteins. Those are non-examinable questions generally. I've never really seen them for HSP exams. So I don't think you necessarily need to memorize plasma proteins, but it's good to know these things, right? So, you know, that speaks to what plasma is composed of, so your composition of plasma. So plasma is a yellowish fluid composed of 90% water and 10% dissolved substances. And this here is a breakdown of what these 10% dissolved substances contain, right? So what is the function of plasma? Why is plasma important? What does plasma do? So the functions of plasma. The main function of plasma is transporting the following. So plasma is a liquid, right? It is 90% water, 10% dissolved substances. And I already explained what those dissolved substances are. And the purpose of that is to assist with transporting. What is plasma transporting? So plasma transports products of digestion from the ileum, which is the small intestine, to the liver and the body cells. They transport oxygen from the body cells to the lungs, right? So when our body cells go through respiration, right? And it gives off that carbon dioxide. That carbon dioxide needs to leave your system, right? Because remember, we cannot breathe carbon dioxide in. That can kill us, right? So it needs to find a way to exit our body. Remember, our body is made up of cells, and respiration happens down to the cellular level. I explained this already, right? So it's not just as humans, we're just okay with breathing in and out, and that's it. No. As we're taking in oxygen, consistently breathing and taking in that oxygen, where does the oxygen go? It goes down to our bodies on a cellular level. And then when the cell no longer needs, it absorbs the oxygen, a byproduct of that is to give off carbon dioxide. So where does that carbon dioxide go? It dissolves and diffuses into your lungs, and then it needs to be released, right? Urea from the liver to the kidney. So your liver and your kidney, right? They are excretory organs. Hormones, so from the glands that produce them, our endocrine system. So our endocrine glands, right? Particular target audience, target organs, sorry. So target organs. So we would actually be looking at this at some point in time. I can't say, but looking at hormones and how they affect the body is actually a topic that we will be visiting hopefully soon, so that you would understand what we mean by target organs, right? Heat as well from the liver and muscles to all parts of the body, right? So plasma transports products of digestion, carbon dioxide, urea, hormones, and heat. Okay. Um, it's telling me that my battery is running low. I have about 32 minutes left. I'm hoping that that would be sufficient. I'm hoping that it doesn't cut off. Right now I don't have it plugged in, but I need to plug it in. Give me a second. Let me plug in my laptop. So I really, truly don't want it to cut off while I am recording. The thing about Zoom is you only have a limited time, but this is the only platform that I'm able to record on, unfortunately. And I have the basic package, which is about 40 minutes, but I'm able to cover, I think, a lot more in the 40 minutes here than on Google Meet, because on Google Meet, I do a lot of talking, linking the topic and so on in different ways. Great. So I don't have to worry about the laptop cutting off. Okay, so serum. So serum is something that is also a part of plasma. So what is serum? Serum is plasma without fibrinogen. So this goes back to plasma protein, remember? Let's go back and I will show you. Plasma protein, example, fibrinogen and prothrombin, albumin and antibodies, right? So serum is actually plasma without fibrinogen and other factors needed for the blood to clot. Okay, so serum is the part of the blood that is left over after red and white blood cells, platelets, and clotting factors have been removed. So serum is equal to plasma minus clotting factors, right? So serum, it doesn't clot, basically, because we know what happens when we bleed, right? Our blood clots. It tries to clot very quickly. I'm not sure if you know what the purpose of clotting is. So a blood clot could be a good thing and a bad thing. So when it is you get cut, you would like, especially if it's a major cut, you would like for clotting to take place because clotting is what stops the bleeding. It is a natural means by which your body stops the bleeding, right? It usually is the plasma reacting with the atmosphere, so the air and so on. And it has, clotting properties. Your plasma naturally has clotting properties. Um, but a blood clot could also be negative if it's happening where you know for a fact that internally there's no cut in you. Internally, right? You are existing, you have blood flowing through your network of veins and so on consistently. But if a blood clot happens, blood clots mean blood thickens, and our vessels are very tiny. It's a network of veins and so on, is very tiny. So a blood clot is very large. And if it blocks blood from flowing freely to a particular organ, it can cause severe complications and can even result in death. So it is something, noteworthy. Right. So continuing on with what plasma contains. So this is the functions of plasma. This is what plasma contains and so on. We're going to look at red blood cells, the structure and function of blood cells. So, right. So blood cells in biology, it's known as erythrocytes, right? Um, it consists of a cell membrane as well as cytoplasm, which is rich in hemoglobin, and hemoglobin is, it gives things that, red color, and it's an iron-rich containing protein, right? They are biconcave discs. So biconcave mean they are two concave. So one to the top, one to the bottom. So envision, I don't know, think of a particular candy. Um, I don't know if you know what Smarties look like or what we commonly refer to tablet sweetie, right? So tablet sweetie, right? There is a concave like disc shape. Picture your finger, your thumb and forefinger holding something and pressing into that and creating like a sink in the top and the bottom part. That's what they mean by biconcave, right? So biconcave discs with a thin center creates a relatively large surface area to volume ratio, so gases can easily diffuse in and out. Remember, I told you that the purpose of that shape is to transport oxygen, and oxygen is a gas. So this is what they mean by diffuse gas due to the large surface area to volume ratio. They have no nucleus, right? Therefore, they only live for about 3 to 4 months. So our red blood cells, they only live about 3 to 4 months before a new one is regenerated. Contains the red pigment such as hemoglobin. I would have mentioned hemoglobin is rich in iron. It's an iron containing protein, but it's also what gives blood that red pigment. It's slightly elastic, which allows them to squeeze through the narrowest of capillaries. So you can just imagine how minute and minuscule red blood cells are. You definitely can't see them with the naked eye, right? So what do they do? So the formation of cells. So this looks at the cell type and structure, right? So your red blood cells, which are your erythrocytes, they are biconcave discs. They have no nucleus. They contain hemoglobin, which is the red pigment found in cells, right? They are slightly elastic, which allow them to be squeezed through the narrowest of capillaries. How are they formed? They are formed in the red bone marrow found in flat bones. For example, pelvis, scapula, ribs, sternum, cranium, and vertebrae, and at the ends of long bones such as your humerus and femur, right? They are broken down mainly in the liver and the spleen. And what are their functions? They transport oxygen as oxyhemoglobin from the lungs to the cell, from the lungs to the body cells, and they transport small amounts of carbon dioxide from body cells to the lungs, right? White blood cells, which are our leukocytes, right? leukocytes or lymphocytes. I think I would have mentioned this already earlier on. So your white blood cells, which are your leukocytes or lymphocytes, they are slightly larger than red blood cells, and they are a lot less in terms of number. So approximately one blood cells is 600 red blood cells. So that's the ratio, right? So you definitely have a lot more red blood cells in your body than you do white blood cells. And they have two main types. So you have 25% of them are lymphocytes and 75% of them are phagocytes. So they actually describe what they are here. So I will explain. So the first one, let's go back up. Oops. Lymphocytes. So lymphocytes have a cell membrane, large rounded nucleus, and they are with a non-granular cytoplasm, right? So it's smooth. They have a rounded shape. They have a large round nucleus that controls the production of antibodies, right? And they only have a small amount of cytoplasm. They are developed from cells in the red bone marrow and mature um, in other organs, such as the lymph nodes, spleen, and thymus gland. So remember, I told you that your lymphatic system or your lymph nodes speak to your immunity, your immune system. So this is where the link between your white blood cells and your immune system comes in, right? So your white blood cells, we know, are they produce antibodies, and antibodies in turn destroy disease-causing bacteria and viruses, right? And of course, we have white blood cells, which actually eat bacteria. So they engulf and destroy pathogens. So they are like soldiers in your body, just fighting off foreign invaders, right? Um, so just a side note, persons who are in need of a bone marrow transplant, right, is something that is very important because the purpose of your bone marrow is to produce your red and white blood cells. So if it is you have, your bone marrow isn't functioning the way that it should, and your body is unable to produce red and white blood cells, obviously you're going to run into complications. The purpose of your red blood cells alone and the purpose of your white blood cells, your body is unable to do any of that. So it makes you susceptible to getting sick very often, right? And of course, with the red blood cells unable to transport oxygen and so on affects you, right? So the other white blood cell we want to look at is the phagocytes. So what are phagocytes? Phagocytes, they move in and out of capillaries through their walls and they engulf pathogens. So the phagocytes are more the soldier ones. They're your, back up here. Your lymphocytes produce your antibodies, so they are the ones that are creating like this protective barrier to assist you. And the phagocytes, they are the actual soldiers which are engulfing and destroying pathogens. And again, they are formed in the red bone marrow. So the mere fact that this is where it's being formed, essentially, shows just the importance of your bone marrow. So they move by pseudopodia, which means that they can move in and out of capillaries through their walls, and they can engulf pathogens using this method. And they also have a lobed nucleus. Look at the shape of the nucleus here, right? It's shaped like a lobe, kind of like your ear, right? When you say earlobe, so it's kind of shaped like your earlobe here, in comparison to your lymphocyte, right, which is round. So next we have platelets, which are thrombocytes, right? They are cell fragments. They have no nucleus and they only live for about 10 days. They are again formed in cells in red bone marrow. So if this question ever arises where, CSEC asks you all, where are red and white blood cells formed? You just indicate they are formed from cells in the bone marrow, red bone marrow, right? And the purpose of the thrombocytes, they help the blood to clot, right? So your platelets contain thrombocytes, which are blood clotting um, cells, right? So what is blood clotting? So blood clotting, when the skin is cut and bleed, the blood quickly clots. The following events occur to form the clot. Platelets in the blood at the cut become spiky in shape and stick to each other and begin to plug the cut. So this is not something obviously that you see with your naked eye. You are not able to see that, the platelets are forming a spiky shape, right? But you can see with your naked eye that it's beginning to kind of harden and gel over, right? So what is happening is an enzyme is being released called thrombokinase and thromboplastin. Remember that anything when you hear thrombo, you think of blood clotting, right? So what is thrombokinase? Thrombokinase is an enzyme. Remember, anything that ends with ASE is an enzyme. So thrombokinase, with the help of calcium, ions, and vitamin K in the blood, converts the inactive plasma protein prothrombin into active thrombin, right? So remember we spoke about plasma proteins, fibrinogen and prothrombin. So now we know what the prothrombin is. Prothrombin is inactive plasma protein, and when it is we get cut, the enzyme thrombokinase, right, converts the inactive plasma protein prothrombin into active thrombin. Thrombin converts the soluble plasma protein fibrinogen into insoluble fibrin, which becomes fibers. And these fibers are what connect together, kind of like a little network, a little net to form the blood clot, right? So the fibrin fibers form a network across the cut, which traps blood cells and form a clot. So this is actually what it looks like under the microscope. This is what we mean, all of these little plasma particles, little particles, and so on. So come back up here to this cell membrane and cytoplasm. So these are the cells fragments and so on. And this is what you're seeing here. Fragments of red blood cells and so on being trapped in the fibrin fibers, and it's forming a network which traps the blood cells to form a clot. The clot dries and develops into a scab, and what's taking place is a number of processes under that scab. New skin is being formed and so on, and once that new skin is formed, the scab dries over and falls off, right? So it's important not to pick at your scabs because it's part of the healing process, right? Clotting is important because it prevents blood loss and it also stops bacteria, so pathogens, from entering your body. Pathogens would be bacteria, funguses, anything that is foreign would be considered a pathogen, right? So when we think of blood, we also think of blood groups, right? Blood can be classified into different blood groups based on chemicals present on the surface of red blood cells. And these are known as antigen, right? So when we had COVID, they had the COVID antigen testing, which is, I guess, factoring in, your blood, right? So there are two grouping systems. The ABO system, which divides blood into four groups, Group A, B, Group AB, and Group O, and the rhesus system, which divides blood into two groups, rhesus positive and rhesus negative. Blood vessels. There are three main types of blood vessels. So when you think of a vessel, right, a vessel is something that contains or has the ability to contain something else, right? So there are three main types of blood vessels. We have arteries, capillaries, and veins, right? They're all very similar in what they do in terms of function, right? But some have different sizes. Some have different purposes, right? So what does this mean? The relationship between the different blood vessels. So here you have veins. So the purpose of your vein is different from the purpose of your artery and of course your capillary. So I think capillaries more has to do, it's smaller in size, but let's see if they extrapolate on this a little bit more. So arteries carry blood away from the heart, right? On entering an organ, an artery branches into smaller arteries called arterioles, which then branch into a network of capillaries, which run through the organ. Capillaries then join into small veins called venules, which join to form a single vein, which leads back from the organ towards the heart. So let's go back here. See if we could put that into some sort of explanation. So your artery, this is your heart here, this is your organ, right? And as they said that your artery actually takes away from the heart, right? So let's go back down. It says the arteries carry blood away from the heart. And if you look at the diagram here, that's exactly what is happening. Your artery here, right? If you look at the direction of the arrow, it's taking blood away from the heart and it's pumping that through your various organs through a network of, smaller vessels called capillaries. And what they do is that they form those small capillaries, right? They're called venules or small veins, which then go into a larger vein and goes back to the heart, right? And so the heart is able to pump the blood, arteries take it away and sends it back through the organ. So it's a process, it's a cycle, it's circulating, right? Look at the color. So it's coming out from the heart red, right? And that red is representative of oxygenated blood. So that blood contains oxygen. That's what your heart does, right? Your heart is able to pump oxygenated blood. Your veins are taking deoxygenated blood towards your heart. Your heart is oxygenating it because of those platelets, those red blood cells, right? And they are taking that oxygenated blood now away from the heart towards different parts of your organs. So that's how it works. I think it's quite interesting. Right. So here we have a nice table showing arteries, capillaries, and veins, and we're comparing them, right? Let's see, right. So arteries, main thing, transport blood away from the heart to body tissues and organs. Blood flows through under high pressure. Blood moves in pulses created as the ventricles contract. Ventricles meaning your heart, right? Your heart contains your left ventricle, right ventricle, and so on. And think about the heart pumping. It's an organ, so it's constricting, it's contracting consistently, contracting and expanding. So pulsing, when something is pulsing, when they feel for your pulse, right, guys? When they feel for your pulse, they put two fingers on your neck to feel the blood flowing because it's going according to how your heart beats. That's how blood is able to pulse through your veins, right? So blood moves and pulses created as the ventricles contract. Blood flows rapidly. Blood is oxygenated except in the pulmonary arteries. So the pulmonary arteries don't have your oxygenated blood. Most lie deep within the body, so they are protected, and they do not possess valves except the aorta and the pulmonary artery as they leave the ventricles of the heart. So we will look at the heart, and you will be able to understand what is being said here better, right? Capillaries. Capillaries transport blood throughout all body tissues and organs, whereas arteries just transport blood away from the heart to body tissues and organs, right? So capillaries transport blood throughout The blood flows under low pressure. Blood flows smoothly, so there's no pulsing. Blood flows very slowly, so it's slowly, smoothly, no pulsing. Blood becomes deoxygenated as it travels through the capillaries, right? And it runs through all tissues and organs, and it do not possess any valves. Your veins. Your veins transport blood back towards the heart from the body tissues and organs. So after it gets deoxygenated in the capillaries, right? Um, it needs to go back to the heart to get oxygenated because remember, it's a cycle and your blood is circulating throughout your body. Blood flows through under low pressure, flows smoothly and slowly. Blood is deoxygenated except in the pulmonary veins, right? So it's the opposite of the arteries. Blood is oxygenated except in the pulmonary veins, whereas in the veins, blood is deoxygenated except in the pulmonary veins. Many lie close to the body of the surface. Many lie close to the body surface. And we know this because you can actually see your veins. So if you look at the lighter parts of your skin, you can see that blue, bluish, sometimes reddish, depending on how clear your skin is, right? You can actually look and see your veins underneath your skin, right? Because they are close to the surface of your body in comparison to arteries, right, which lie deep within the body so that they are protected because your arteries are larger. And then I'm not saying veins are not important, but you really don't want to mess with your arteries because again, they are blood is flowing rapidly, it's oxygenated. So this is like, your oxygenated blood moving very quickly throughout your body and it's moving under high pressure. So this is where people who get, injured, an artery has been severed, right? There are femoral arteries as well. So there's a major artery in your femur, which is your thigh, right? So if you get into a particular injury and that gets severed, because that blood is moving under high pressure, it's pulsing and flowing rapidly, you can bleed out and die very quickly, as opposed to getting cut in your vein, right? Getting cut in your vein, it's more of a slow process. Could also lead to something fatal, but it's a lot slower than being cut having your arteries cut, right? They also possess valves to prevent the low pressure, slow flowing blood from flowing backwards because you don't want blood to be flowing backward, right? So here they show free flowing valve open and back flowing blood where the valve is closed to prevent anything from going back out, right? Oops, because I don't want to touch on the heart today. I'm actually going to wrap up right here. So have walls composed of 3 layers. The walls are thick and elastic. So your artery have walls composed of 3 layers, which are thick and elastic, right? So again, this is to protect you. It's deep within the body to be able to protect you. And the arteries itself, right, consists of 3 layers. The walls are thick and elastic to withstand the high pressure of the blood. Because, I mean, think about it. Even in Trinidad, going back to the Wassa situation, where you have water running through these pipes, sometimes the pressure can be so intense, the pipe bursts, right? You cannot have that happen inside your body, right? So your arteries are actually stronger than Wassa pipelines because some people actually have, when they say a vein burst, right? And it causes an aneurysm or something. That can happen too. Sometimes the walls kind of thin out a little bit in your arteries, and the pressure of blood flowing through there may cause an accident where, something happens negative. But those are not normal. It doesn't happen generally, right? I'm obviously speaking about an anomaly, something that doesn't really occur as often. Your capillaries, the walls are composed of a single layer. So substances pass easily between the blood and body cells, so in and out, right? And in your veins, you have walls composed of 3 layers. The walls are thin because they do not have to withstand high pressure, right? Remember, blood is moving slowly through your veins, right? And it speaks to, so you see something here called lumen. So lumen is actually something that you actually find in your camera lens as well, that term. So this little circle here, that lumen is like a little window, right? That space in between your lens, if you so to speak, for your camera, right? But in this case, we are looking at blood artery, your arteries, you're looking at your capillaries and your veins, so blood vessels essentially. So it's very narrow for the artery. It's extremely narrow in your capillaries. So remember, your capillaries are very thin, they're small and tiny, right? And it's very wide in your veins, right? All right, so I don't want to touch on the heart as yet. I will have to leave that for the next note, right? So I'm just going to recap what it is we looked at today, right? So we looked at a lot of things. We looked at, I would have started from the top. I would have started at the cardiovascular, not the cardiovascular, the circulatory system, comprising of your cardiovascular system as well as your lymphatic system. The need for a transport system in the body. Why is it important, right? We also looked at materials which are transported around the human body. We looked at the first part of your circulatory system, which is the cardiovascular system, and what the cardiovascular system is made up of. We looked at blood, and blood being a major component, right? Because blood is our main mode of transport, right? So we break down exactly what blood is. Blood contains something called plasma. We broke down what plasma contains as well, what the functions of plasma is, you know. We looked at blood cells. Oops. We looked at blood cells, which you have your red blood cells, you have your white blood cells, right? So you have your red blood cells, which are your erythrocytes, and you have your white blood cells, which are your leukocytes, your phagocytes, and so on, right? And your platelets, which are your thrombocytes. And your thrombo, when you hear the word thrombin, you think of blood clotting, right? Then we go into blood clotting, a nice explanation here. We look briefly at blood groups, so you don't need to delve too much into the blood group one at this point. Then we looked at blood vessels and how blood is transported throughout the body. And well, from the heart, which is your cardiovascular system, right? So from the heart to different parts of the body, right? And it's through three main types of blood vessels, which are your arteries, capillaries, and veins. And there's a really nice table that I think you should go through because it is a lot of information. Now, that's the thing about HSV, it entails a lot of reading. And if you don't like to read, it's going to be tough to understand a lot of the information. And I say this because while you can practice past papers and pass HSP exam, which is great, and obviously that's something that I encourage you all to do, you know, work on past paper questions because they do tend to repeat themselves a lot as well. Um, you do still want to take away something from, HSB. So you want to be able to learn how the body functions, how it works, and so on. It's not just about, um, being able to answer basic questions. Understanding how your body operates, why it does what it does, how it does what it does is important as well, right? So, I hope that today's lesson was insightful for you all, right? I am going to post it to my YouTube. And of course, you all are free to email me should you have any questions at all. Let me know if there's something that I went through that you don't understand. Right. And I guess I will see you all for the next session. So I am ending the meeting here because I don't want the meeting to cut off as well because there's a time limit, right? So let's see, how do I stop share? And is that meeting controls? Hide. Where's the meeting controls? Oh boy, I hid meeting controls. Let's see, escape. Right. Stop sharing.